Sorry, I'm just letting a few people in. Right. Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon for this presentation with John and Carol on Universal Design for Learning. I'm just going to hand it over to Carol and John now. And as I said before, if you have any questions, just feel free to type them into the chat and we will talk about them at the end of the session. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Looking down the list of participants, I think we know a lot of people here, but not taking things for granted. I'm John Galloway. Until a little while ago, I worked for Tower Hamlets as an advisory teacher for ICT, SEN and Inclusion, and I still do a little. I'm sort of retired, but not really, because things like this keep coming up, and I kind of think, well, that looks interesting. Let's do that. So that's why I'm here. How about you, Carol?
Well, the same thing really, except I didn't work for Tower Hamlets. Totally failed at retiring. I've tried twice now, and interesting jobs keep coming up, and I think, oh yeah, okay. So yeah, still here, but I do try and do things like work at the end of the day so I can have a lie-in. I'm quite lazy.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about Universal Design for Learning. It's something that both Carol and I have been talking about for some years. It's not not really very new. In fact, hang on. In fact, it originated back in the 1960s in architecture. It was thought about. It was called simply Universal Design. The idea of it was to design out barriers from the built environment. So this is a very simple example of universal design, the drop curb. As you can see, it would support people who are in wheelchairs to cross roads. But obviously it would also help people who are pushing buggies, pulling wheelie cases, cycling bikes. You can see the knobbed surface there, so that if you're visually impaired, you know when you get to the curb. But it also works for small children to tell them that they can walk on ahead but don't go beyond the bobbles, that kind of thing. So the idea being is that if you adapt an environment or remove barriers in an environment for particular groups, it actually improves the outcome for all. And Universal Design for Learning is simply applying those principles into education. Here's another one. I quite like this. Although, were you pushing a wheelchair, so it's a set of steps and also a ramp combined. Pushing a wheelchair, that might be an uphill struggle, but it could also be that it's the angle from which it's been taken. But you get the idea. And part of the thinking behind it is the notion that we are all different. There's a guy called Todd Rose. I'll play you a bit of video of Todd in a moment. But he talks about how the myth of the average. So that if we provided footwear for the average, we'd all be wearing size 8.5. So it wouldn't matter what size your feet are or what task you were doing, you would all get the same shoes. So this is Todd just talking about his thinking about the myth of the average.
I haven't got any sound, John.
Okay, excuse me one moment. Sorry, I did test the sound earlier. I will come back. Excuse me a moment. I need to reshare. Sorry. Are you there? Right. Okay.
The end of average for education means that it is unacceptable to design learning environments assuming most kids are like an average kid, right? Because it turns out scientifically, mathematically, there actually isn't such a person. It's just an empty middle. They don't exist. And so you've designed textbooks and curricular materials and assessments that fit actually nobody at all. And then kids muddle through, and then we reward the ones that muddle through the best, with better grades, all the while thinking we're actually nurturing their potential, and we're not. One of the mistakes I think we're making in education is to view personalized learning as another fad, but it's not. I mean, it's something bigger than that. There's something stirring in society. We're getting away from one size fits all and focusing on systems that really try to understand who you are and help develop you to your full potential. We have to show that this is a complete rethink of ourselves as a society, and then position education as part of that. For me, things like character development have lost ground in education, and they should be front and center. But the only way we get to do that is if we're really good at meeting every kid where they're at and giving them what they need to develop that broader range of skills and abilities and knowledge.
Okay, I'm sure none of us would disagree with that. The idea that every child is different. In fact, in the fields we will all work in, that's no real surprise at all. I might take issue with his payoff when he says we have to give every child what they need. I'm not sure about give, it's about provide, but we'll come to that. And just to, we also do it. We talk about all sorts of what we call them, special educational needs and syndromes, and you can see them all there. These are all pulled out of the code of practice. But behind all of that are individual students. Every one of them, regardless of what label we apply to them, has individual needs. Now, the challenge for us is to then try to meet all those individual needs. And what UDL does is it turns it around and says that we create environments, we create approaches that within which those needs can be met. And we'll see what I mean by that in a minute. So UDL, as I say, came in from architecture, but there is an element of neuroscience behind it. So it has three strands. It has the how of learning, the why of learning, and the what of learning. So the why, engagement, why is it that we're bothering with this? What is it? So what's the content? What are the things to be learnt? And the how, so how do we then go about learning that? So the notion is that of those three aspects, making up the learning process and the thinking about what each of those means in practical activity. So these are UDL guidelines. Don't strain your eyes because I've chopped them up. And we start with that strand, which is engagement. And you'll be very aware of this, the idea of recruiting interest. And what they suggest is if when we're recruiting interest, we optimize individual choice and autonomy. So it isn't about us necessarily finding the things that engage that child, but providing the opportunities for that child to become engaged, which is slightly different about where we place the emphasis, the responsibility, the approach. We optimize relevance, value and authenticity. Yes, obviously, for me, obvious that you're more likely to learn if you can see why you're learning, what relevance is. But the other one, minimize threats and distractions. Yeah, I remember a few years ago, a brand new school designed as such so the classrooms had sliding walls, and so that you could create wider spaces that included where you could also spill out onto the corridors. But one of the things that happened was if the walls were left open, the kids, instead of looking at the board, were all the time looking over their shoulders to see who might be approaching from the corridors. They felt threatened somehow. They felt perhaps somebody was coming in behind them. We also need to think about sustaining effort, so vary demands, foster collaboration and community, increase mastery oriented feedback. So what we're saying to them is not necessarily, oh, you're doing very well, but you are able to do this. If you could, can you do a bit more? What's the next step for you? And that is all linked into self-regulation as well. Is trying to help the learner to set their the challenges for themselves, or to cope with those challenges. So, for instance, facilitate personal coping skills and strategies, part of that is about the resilience, is I got it wrong. So you've got to try it again. You've got to see that as being a learning process as opposed to the end of the process. Under our representation, we have perception. So some of this, and just to be clear, whilst these are in 3 columns, there's a degree of overlap between them. So we offer ways of customizing the display of information. Now that can be that we change font sizes, we change colour contrast, we add subtitles onto videos, that kind of things. Offer alternatives for auditory information so you can read it. Offer alternatives to visual information so you can look at you can read the transcript as opposed to having to watch the video. Language and symbols. You're probably all familiar with the use of symbols to support vocabulary. And clarify syntax and structure. That's things like plain English. That's things like sentence structure. We need to illustrate through multiple media, so we give more than one route. And similarly, our comprehension. Activate or supply background knowledge. Now, a lot of the time we do this anyway. We connect what we're doing with what's already known, but we may actually need to point that out to some of our learners, or in order for them to understand what's happening, we actually have to teach something else in order to give them the background knowledge in order that they can then learn. And pick out things like, guide information processing and visualization. Can you see? What do you think? And that maximise transfer and generalisation. Again, I'm sure we all do it, but we try to take learning from one situation and put it in another, or bring learning in from a different situation into what we're now learning. And then we go into the action and expression. So this really is about showing what you know. So vary the methods for response and navigation. We don't just ask them to write, we might ask them to do a presentation. We might offer them the chance to do a podcast or an animation. Optimise access to tools and assistive technologies. Now, UDL lends itself to the use of educational technology, and we'll go on shortly onto what those technologies are and how they can help. Again, use multiple media for communication. We're not connecting with them in one way, nor asking them to respond in one way. That one, build fluencies with graduated levels of support for practice and performance. That means make sure they know the tools. And as they are developing their skills, so we're making sure that they develop those tools even more. So they maybe make a short video using a mobile phone. At another point, we go on to teach them the skill of editing the video. Again, we then teach them to edit the audio separately and so on, so that they have the skills necessary to be able to use the tools available in order that they can show us what it is they've learnt. I like this. Executive functioning, guide appropriate goal setting. So we work alongside them. So instead of us simply saying, I want you to know this by this point, we work alongside them to realistically determine what can be learnt, what skills and knowledge can be learnt, and how we get to that point. Facilitate managing information and resources, so we help them to understand what resources they have, and enhance capacity for monitoring progress. Part of that we also saw in the engagement element is about self-assessment, is them recognising what it is they now know and so on. And finally, at the bottom of that original graphic, we had this is what we're after. So by providing multiple means of engagement, we get expert learners who are purposeful and motivated. By providing multiple means of representation, they are resourceful and knowledgeable. By providing multiple means of action and expression, they have strategic and goal orientated. They are focused in the way that they are learning. And just a very quick summary for that, which might be the most useful point for you, is engagement. We offer options to support and stimulate motivation, sustained enthusiasm for learning. So there's not one way of connecting them with the learning. We present the information differently, so there's not one way of the information being given to them and them extracting meaning from the information. And we offer different options and supports for them to then demonstrate what it is they've learned. So the kind of things we'd be looking for if we're taking a UDL approach is independent, autonomous learners who we're guiding, who we're approaching with flexibility. We give them choice, we offer them variety, we're using multimedia, and the resources we're using we ensure are accessible and inclusive. But it isn't a checklist, it's a philosophy. It's a way of considering how it is we're working, how we remove the barriers to learning, and in doing that, the barriers for the individuals, how we open up learning, and in doing that, providing a greater degree of opportunity for them to learn. So how do we do that? How do we do that in the classroom? So do you want to pick that up, Carol, or? Yeah,
sure. Are you going to, can I take control of this? I can.
Don't think you can, you?
If you give me approval.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, hello. Right. So
can I just say, Carol, you're echoing a bit. I think, John, you might need to mute yourself while Carol. Yeah, thanks.
Yep. Okay.
Is that better? Is that better?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So, you guys know about assistive technology, and the point now, and I mean, as I say, John and I have been talking about this for several years now. This isn't new. And in America, where I work quite a lot, this is actually the law now. UDL is the law in every state. Whether they step up and actually do it or not is another matter, but it is the law. But the point of assistive technology, I have always felt, and I've argued for years, is that it's a toolbox. And it's a toolbox that should never be controlled by me. I have always felt I should be showing students, oh, you could do it this way, or you can do it with this, and they choose which they're most comfortable with. And that choice may alter. So I never feel like a device, you have this device and that's you fixed forever through your school career, because obviously their needs may change, or different tools will do different things. So the assistive technology, low or high tech, is there to support access to learning. And having said, I've got control. Oh, there, right. So and so we've got a mixture between, if you like, the specialist tech that we know and love. Then we've got ubiquitous devices such as the iPad, which of course has been a game changer, but it wasn't designed for education. As any of you who are old enough to remember the first early rumblings when we adopted it for education, we've got Alexa, Siri, and so on. And all of these things like voice control, we've got high contrast and visual changes. And when I started with computers back in the day before they were born, actually, we're talking slates. When I started, I just used different coloured chalk. But then when the computers came in, and these kind of options, that things like contrast, it was about 15 clicks down in a tiny hidden away area. And now they're just there for everybody. A friend I know had her 30th birthday yesterday, had an Apple Watch, and was showing me how she'd customized it. Speech to text or speech control used to be very specialist, and of course it's not now. So we live in an AT world. We are all using assistive technology. Your washing machine is assistive technology. When people argue with me about the use of assistive technology, I show them pictures of the scientists working on microscopes during the coronavirus early stages. And I say, how the heck would they have found that virus if they had to do it with their naked eye? They couldn't. We live with assistive technology. Excuse me. And some of it is very specialist. So, for example, the beautiful Xbox controlling device is a specialist device. It's not something that every Xbox user is going to have. Having said that, there are accessibility features just there within. So it's about an AT world, but we also have things that just happen. There's the watch. And so what you've got, and I hope I can make this work for you. Yes, there we are. John did that very clever thing, is that general technology and assistive technology, there's now a massive overlap on the Venn diagram. At one point, they were very, very separate things, and now they are huge. And we are not all little Lego models. When John said about working to the individual and providing an environment in which the individual can make those choices, because we can't, we can very rarely get it right for every single individual in a very mixed class. But what we can provide is an optimum learning environment with lots of universal choices. And we do recognise, and I'm sure I'm speaking to the converted here, that every child is different. Early stages of my career, you were defined by your diagnosis. So Down syndrome was just a diagnosis. And people had very low expectations, extremely low expectations. And of course, now we've got people with Down syndrome in America who are statesmen, run for the local government. We have got people in education with Down syndrome, particularly working into early years and into special schools. So, you know, things are different now, and we are recognizing that there's different things. And that comes from this huge change in the three biggies, Microsoft, Google and Apple, all competing the whole time to make universal accessibility offerings. And isn't that lovely for us? Because it means that if a child says, I've got such and such somewhere, Microsoft House at home, fine, I can show them where the stuff is for there. If they've got Apple and an iPad at home, or mum's got an iPhone, I can show them where it is there. And actually, let's be blunt, usually I don't have to show them, they've found it already. Then we go back to the environment, and now there's a huge overlap between the universal design for learning and still universal access. So this is a playground in Meadowbank in Edinburgh, and they've taken the not the widget symbols, they're the Dynavox symbols, and they have put the boards up next to each piece of play equipment. So the children, if they haven't got a device or a portable E-frame or whatever with them, and they're not Dynavox user maybe, they can still communicate what they want to do and how it works. So key to everything John said is about not the educators not prescribing, but in a way we have to have a bigger understanding, because we have to offer choice and to the learner and learner control. So, you know, whether they use symbols, whether they use Braille or Moon. At one time, if I had somebody who was blind, I automatically started teaching Braille. I don't now, because there's so many tech solutions that the person may not want to go down that route. If they do want to go down that route, I still teach Braille. Speech to text, text to speech, audio, all of that is there. The encouragement we have now to put alt text description on every image. When you're using any social media, Facebook or Twitter, it will read out to you. So we really have started to move on. And LGfL, who we're here representing today, have got a nice universal offering, and they're building on it further. So we've got LGfL have got things like Busy Things in there and J2E, but there are other of my favourites. Read and Write Gold is amazing. Inclusive Technology, you will know, offer loads of things. Praetorian's not on that list, but if you've not had a good look at the Praetorian website recently, some of the stuff Dave and his team are producing, particularly on environmental control, beautiful. And of course the wondrous Clicker 8, which I can't speak too highly of, but you've luckily limited my minutes, so I can't. A product, just to give you kind of an unusual example, John and I are very, very keen on Lifter. And Lifter is about universal engagement. And they say, enhance your curriculum with rich and diverse human stories. And to cut it very simply, but I can't tell you enough to go and look at this. It's a digital learning platform, and you can explore the world, and you can see video of how different people engage with the world and engage with their family and people with them. And oh, sorry. So there, for example, is a still from one of my favourite families. That gentleman's a taxi driver. That's his daughter, and look, she's put her best dress on for the filming, which is lovely. But you see the meal he's cooked for the evening meal. And can you see there's like a blue tag, and I can go onto the blue tag and I can see the recipe being done. And if I go on to the pink tag above his head, I can see what about him and why he's a single parent and what his job's like. And if you can see, I can maneuver around the room. If in that top corner, I can maneuver around, I can explore their house and explore their home and find out things about them. Now, this is such an incredibly strong resource offering, and it is universal because it gives us so many different ways of exploring the content. There are so many possibilities with Lifter, and I have to be honest, I think when John and I saw it, we were blown away by the possibilities. I don't think the company themselves had actually realized how powerful the product they had was, and couldn't understand. I mean, they were delighted, obviously, that we were pleased. So it's a world of possibility. And then I'm a huge TikTok fan, huge TikTok fan. This is one of my favorite people on TikTok.
And I don't want the world to see me, 'cause I don't think that they'd understand.
Our young people are on social media and they are using it to their advantage. They're talking about themselves. And look at that little thing. You could lip read it. She is signing. We have got the music and we have got the closed captions. So we've got so many routes on a thing that, you know, on just a social media platform that, you know, give us the message that she wants to give us. And her messages are strong. So to finish on time, which is a bit of a miracle for John and I, we could obviously, to try and do this huge subject in half an hour is quite tricky. But the key elements that we want to talk about, it's a philosophy. John was right to say that. It's a philosophy of trying for universal access. It's a philosophy that puts control in as far as possible into the user's hands, and we become facilitators and enablers. All right, that's kind of our role. Now, this means that just because you've got that, I've said to you, I adore Clicker 8. I love it. What I can no longer do is say, this is the only thing for you. I need to show the student, you could do this, or you can do the same thing this way, or you can do it this way, and let them try things and work out what's best for them. And please don't be sitting there thinking, well, that's all right if you've got somebody bright and dyslexic, for example. The more I experiment, and particularly in America, I'm doing UDL and looking at UDL with groups of children with severe learning difficulties, and they make the choices as well. Once they know the options, they will pick, and it's not always something that you think is the best, but the point is, once they've picked, they engage with it. And it's understanding that at any moment in time, that is the best choice. But that choice may change as the task changes, as their needs change, and as what you have able to offer changes. So thank you very much for listening. And that's it from John and I.
Thanks, Carol and John. I thought that was really interesting. Yeah. Now, does anybody have any questions about any of that you would like to? You're welcome to unmute yourselves and turn your cameras on if you would like to. Seem to be very silent. I know Stun them into silence. Yes, I know. I'm going to go and look at this Lifter website. It looks really interesting.
It's beautiful. It is beautiful. And it's a lovely example of universal design for learning, because I could teach vocabulary, I could teach storytelling, I could teach geography, I can teach science, I can teach food technology, I can teach just about anything with that website. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
and it was sorry Annabelle, and it was more or less accidental, but it came about from the attitudes of the people who created it, kind of coinciding with the, I suppose, the underpinning philosophy of UDL. But it is just, well, just so engaging. Yeah, so rich.
I should also say, if there's anybody externally on this call that doesn't know, that we've got Communication Works on the 18th of May, and John and Carol will be there, I think on the LGfL stand, and I think you'll be kind of doing a bit of roving interviewing and things like that. But I'm just going to put a link in the chat to that, just in case people would like to find out about Communication Works. But yes, and what's that? Gwendolyn has just put in the chat. That was brilliant. There's so much to say about this. Thank you. I think it was really useful to have that kind of introduction to it, because I mean, I don't know about everybody else, but I really didn't know anything about UDL, so it's really interesting to hear about it. So anyway, well, unless oh look, yes, oh yes, Carol, yes, we would like everyone to come to come along to the event. Right, now, unless anybody is going to ask anything else.
So I've just dropped in there the original cast who take a lead on UDL can be found at www.cast.org, and they have quite a strong EdTech thread going through them as well. So they're very well worth a visit. They've got some really informative articles and videos and so on, as you'd expect, not one simple mode of transmission.
Great, I have to have a look at that. James has said really informative presentation on a very interesting philosophy, and he will definitely be bearing some of your bearing some of your points in my going forward. I'm like, I can't read. And Maureen's, that was really interesting, thank you. Anyway, right, well, it is 4:02, so I think we will bring this to a close. Thanks very much, John and Carol, and
thank you for the invitation, and thanks to everybody who took, you know, half an hour out of your day to come and sit and listen. Thank you.
Thank you. And the recording will be available as well. We'll put that up on the CENMAC website. Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye. See you at Communication Works.
I'm on the. Can you hear me? Can you see me? No. Right, can you hear me now? I can't hear you now.